Cool, and I'll just take PYs in the chat. That's all good. Thanks. The loyalty seasonal ticket holders show to their chosen sports team should be recognised and should warrant them as important stakeholders that can ensure the longevity of the teams that they support. Two things in this debate today. Firstly, when we look at a veto is when a club or team managers make a public announcement and opens it up to a vote using like the same process as like shareholder votes in companies. If a simple majority votes against a decision made by team managers or executives, it must not go ahead. They must not go ahead with the transaction. Secondly, when we look at seasonal ticket holders, we see these as mostly subnational clubs, because there's where we get like the most engagement from fans, because it is seen as like quite a local thing that most people can get involved in. And secondly, we would compare these to stakeholders and companies because they're people that have disposable income they can share on their team and like can go out and like go to games, and we see these as just like more engaging than the average fan. Our bet in today's debate, we just need to prove that we get more engagement when fans are involved in the decision-making process. 3 points for the House today. Firstly, how we foster local engagement and why that's important. Secondly, how we make better decisions for the team, and a split jack and why we help women's sports specifically and why that is so important. My first instance about how we foster local engagement. Fans are the backbone of sports teams. They're the ones keeping them afloat economically, as they're the ones watching the ads before the games, they're buying the merchandise, and they're going to the games. The ticket holders especially, because they have this extra disposable income to spend on things like these commodities. Their enjoyment should be the number one priority of sports managers because there are the essential economic benefit to the team. Okay, 3 ways we're going to engage them more. Firstly, we're going to keep it local. When we see the startups of clubs and teams, they have their roots in working class communities. Why is this? Because sport is widely accessible. So many people can get involved in sports, which is why we see local sports clubs opening. No matter like how good your socioeconomic district is, you're probably going to have a rugby club, you're probably going to have a soccer club. It's something everyone can get involved in, right? So when a team is bought out by like a large entity, or they make decisions that like seem really out of touch, it just seems really not genuine, right? And that's important because these people have such an emotional involvement in these sports teams. They don't want to see them being like bought up to some random rich person they don't know, right? We see this especially with like when we look at the English Premier Leagues, they're usually bought out by very wealthy Russian oligarchs, and the backlash that always gets that when people who have been following these teams since they were like a child are seeing these people now going and making these decisions that just seem really out of touch, right? In our world, fans retain that sense of belonging and therefore feel more connected to like make decisions with their club when they're in the decision-making process. And secondly, they're more likely to just feel more connected and just more likely to attend more games and even like further their involvement even more and like pass it on to their children. In their world, right? Fans will just like feel a bit out of touch when these decisions are made, and they're less likely to engage because it's just like so unattainable to them now. It feels like more of a spectacle than what sport actually is, an accessible form of media for everyone. Secondly, though, the fans feel like their voice is being heard. But as I said before, fans put emotional and financial support into a team, and it becomes a huge part of their life, right? This is why we see people getting like really sad when their sports team loses, or like really happy and buzzed when their sports team actually wins, because like they feel like they have participated in that. They have followed their journey through all the losses, so the wins just feel that much more spectacular, right? In their world, right, sports teams are like less incentivized to do things for the fans because like the fans just will end up blindly following whatever they do. Therefore, they're using that emotional like attachment they have to make whatever decisions they want. On our side, right, the fans are actually getting something back, and they have an active stake in the decision-making process, which means that the sports teams are going to be like more incentivized to keep them happy. So because they are being held accountable by these people. Thirdly and lastly, though, in the worst case scenario, when people don't want to vote, they have good outcomes too, right? Because even if they like don't know about the technical side of sport and like don't really want to vote, which we believe doesn't happen, because we believe the people that have this option to vote will take it seriously. Because first, they're like are paying customers, they're paying for it, and secondly, they're already invested. But right, for these people who don't vote, they're still going to get the outcomes, right? Because firstly, we believe that the opinions of these people who are voting are usually going to be a pretty good, like, representation of the majority of people's views, because like sporting people, they usually know who the best teams are, they usually know who the best coaches are, they know, they have that knowledge, right? And therefore, in our world, the people who don't vote are more likely to get outcomes that they like. In their world, you see like a greater dissatisfaction from everyone, because like they'll make a bunch of rich people are making decisions that like none of them can understand, and it just does not feel appealing to them, and therefore sport becomes like very inaccessible, as I flagged before. Before I move on to my second substantive, I will take a POI.
How are fans unheard when the fans stop supporting the teams by pulling out and stop purchasing merchandise and seasonal tickets?
Yes, they will, which is why these sports teams are incentivized to make good decisions so the fans will be happy and keep buying merchandise. Right, on my second substantive about how we get better team decisions. Team decisions are almost always made for monetary gain. Therefore, they're bound, like certain aspects are bound to be overlooked by these huge executives, which only have the bottom line in mind, right? So how do we improve that? 3 ways. Firstly, fans are more conscious of players and have like a better social perspective on the whole situation. Ticket holders are more likely to care about players for 3 reasons. Firstly, because they see them on the screen and IRL and probably been following them for years and have developed this parasocial relationship. Secondly, they've idolized them because like, oh wow, look at that person playing soccer. They are so good, I want to be like them. And thirdly, they just genuinely care about their well-being because like genuine human empathy, and we just don't believe that should be overlooked. In our world, the players are going to get better outcomes for their mental and like physical well-being because like these executives can no longer make choices. They just completely overlook these players and their well-being because stakeholders will be like, actually, no, I don't think this will value these players that I care about oh so much. In their world, these people only have one perspective, therefore they're more likely to neglect players' health because it's like just not something that benefits those people who are managing the team. They only care about the bottom line simply because that is why they buy sports teams. They are not invested and they're more likely to like just, and honestly, the team's more likely to just perform badly when like their health isn't taken into account. Secondly, though, we get less controversial and bad calls. Ticket holders are cautious of the downsides of bad management, right? Because they usually know things like the Springbok tour and why that was problematic. And because they're more knowledgeable than the average fan, simply because they are willing to economically invest, which kind of means that like they know enough about it to have a stake in the matter, right? So in our world, we stop bad decisions from being made simply because they know like what a bad decision looks like. They are engaging with sports content regularly. And it encourages managers to make calls that players like to avoid unnecessary work from like getting another option. We believe that's just a lot of work that executives don't want to do. In their world, the power of these managers usually sometimes isn't a good thing because these executives don't really know they don't know the ins and outs of the practical sport itself. They just know the technical side. Therefore, you're getting 2 points of view that are better. We stop tunnel vision. Lastly, and shortly though, why we get better sportsmanship, when managers are caught doing bad things, it usually gets blamed on the players as just kind of like a scapegoat. And we see this with the Australian coach who made players like dust balls with sandpaper in order to make them win, right? So in our world, 3 things. They're less likely to do that because they're more likely, because they'll fire the coaches and they're more likely to like do bad things. And simply because people will have more empathy towards the players, because they are more likely to they'll have more empathy towards the players because they know it is decisions of the coaches. We are very proud to affirm today's motion.
Awesome, thank you Bex for that great speech. I'd now like to invite up the first speaker of the negating team to begin their team's case.
Yeah, so for POIs, you can just like wave or something. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So before I start, I just want to step back and clarify a few things, right? So we know on our side that sports teams are businesses, right? Like any other company, they are a business. They belong to private owners and shareholders, just like every other company to exist. And among like other products sold by sports teams, season tickets are just one of them. Season tickets holders are basically just customers who buy the tickets for like the sports games for the entire season, right? Just like any other company, the customers do not get to make the decisions or determine the direction of the business. Like that's like saying if you go to H&M and you buy like enough t-shirts, you should be able to decide the direction that the company goes in, decides like who gets fired, like who owns a company, and basically where the company is going to take their entire business with it. So therefore, we don't think on our side of the house that team season tickets holders should be able to allowed to like vote to veto major transactions involving like sports teams, right? So vote side negating. So on our side, we reject the motion because we know that veto means that all ticket holders have like one vote and the majority controls the decision, right? So in this debate, in order for us to win, we need to prove that the overall harms that the team actually gets when we give the public more power than they already have just outweighs any of the benefits that the affirming team brings to us. So in this debate, I'll be doing two things. Firstly, I'll be talking about who currently makes the decisions. And secondly, what actually happens to the team when we implement this motion. And my second speaker, Gabe, will talk to you about confidentiality. My rebuttals will be integrated into my speech. So firstly, I'm going to talk about who makes the decisions right now. Well, we know that the owners of the sports teams right now, everyone who are looking for the best interest of the team. They work actively to help support the team. The coaches and the investors, they obviously want like wins for the team. And therefore they have an incentive to actually help them to succeed, to keep them like running smoothly, keep it running well, give them enough resources, treat them properly, pour their like blood, sweat and tears into the team to actually help them succeed, right? So then they're automatically working in the best interest of the team. So then why are we currently letting them make the decisions? Firstly, we see that fans are just not going to be able to make like well-informed decisions like the affirming team likes to convince you that they will. Like even diehard fans, they only have a superficial understanding based on what the team makes public in the world, right? The teams aren't going to expose every single thing about their day-to-day life, about all the interactions with their coaches. So the fans just won't make the best informed decisions based on this because it is not as personally involved, which is why in the status quo, we allow leaders and coaches who are actually personally involved with the team, who to actually make these hard decisions because they're actually inside and like in the private like sector of the team, and they're the ones who are going to lose money and investments if the team doesn't do well. And they just it's not fair to base the decisions on the public who has no access to like all of these private details, right? And then negating the affirming team talked a lot about how these like fans know the best teams and know the best coaches, right? But we see that these are only media controlled opinions, right? The media only puts out there what they want us to see. These coaches can just go and put on like a really good facade and say, oh, like we're really good coaches. And obviously these fans and these watchers are just going to buy into this and they're going to be like, yeah, this is a good coach, but they're not actually personally there to see what's actually good for the team and what's happening at every other training. So this point just completely doesn't stand. And they also talked a lot about how like fans can have a really good connection and personal relationship with these players, right? That's just not true. They only have a superficial understanding based on what they see them do on TV or what they see them do in games. They don't actually go to the trainings and see what happens, see like the mental pressure, see all the kind of personal things that happens, right? And they also they said that like the executives would know more than like the fans would know more than like executives about these sports teams because executives don't know like the nitty-gritty details of this. This is just not true because the fans only see like the outside perspective, like I already talked about, whereas these investors and these coaches actually have like inside algorithms and structures to help them make informed decisions for the team, which is what I'm going to talk about now. Second mechanism is how the owners are making decisions for the teams, these like multi-million-dollar enterprises, in order to ensure that the teams will perform well. So they're using like seasoned experts, obviously. So then because of this, the people, these are the people who have to actually face the downside of the team, and these are the people who therefore should have a say because they have actual capital at risk in this team, right? The fans aren't the people who are losing out when losing money, or like they don't have capital at risk when the team isn't performing well or something wrong is happening in the team, where this is why these investors who are actually losing capital should have the say instead of the public, right? Because these decisions are based on like they're based on like millions of dollars resting on these decisions, and they're often like complex data-driven decisions. They use like algorithms. These coaches and experts come together, they put hours, they put their like mind and soul into these decisions to make sure that they have enough knowledge, and like there's a lot of technical stuff that goes down behind the scenes for that, and these fans just don't have access to this kind of stuff, which is why they're just not as like connected on a personal level to these teams. So then what actually happens when we implement this motion, right? Actually, first I'll take a POI if you have one.
Okay. Why do you believe that stakeholders have no influence over a company's decisions, even though they financially back the company?
Stakeholders do have a decision. That's not what we said. We said that people who actually buy things or buy products from this company should not have a decision, should not have like a stake in this company because they don't own the company. Stakeholders are literally people who have bought a part of this company. Therefore, they do have a say. That's just not what we were talking about. But anyways, back to my point, what happens when we actually implement this, this decision? So instead of being involved, like the public has already got like exercise control over like the spending and the way that this sports team functions, right? So the business is accountable in different ways to like the shareholders and fans. Their responsibility is to like develop the best possible service so that fans can actually hold these sports teams accountable for the decisions that this business makes, right? The fans cannot they shouldn't be able to like purchase, fans can't purchase or be as invested in this because the team will then lose popularity if the fans aren't supporting them, which is why the teams actually have like an incentive to be performing well. So then how is it bad when we implement this model, right? Well, we're not, the people who are like purchasing tickets, we all know that sports is a competitive environment. So we know that like these fans, if they don't support one team, they can easily just go and support another team. Like for example, in LA, you have the Lakers and the Clippers. They can just go support like another one. If one of the LA teams aren't doing bad, they don't actually have any capital risk. So then they shouldn't have as much power. So what actually happens when we give power to these teams, right? Three things. Firstly, the decisions are made based on like superficial considerations. Teams only have a small amount of info based on like what about the inner working of the team, based on what the team decides to actually make public, right? And we already talked about how the media actually controls this, and bad coaches and investors that actually aren't working for the team, and it's just not working well in the team. They can basically put on a facade in front of the media. And make it look like they're doing really well, but the public won't actually know about the complex relationships that actually go on behind closed doors, and the public perceptions are not going to be accurate, nor will they actually correlate with the behind the scenes reality of the team, which is why they shouldn't have as much power, and it'll just overall harm the team by giving them the power. And the second thing that happens is that teams have to start proving themselves to the public every time they want a change in the team, right? We see that behind the scenes, like if you have like abusive coaches or coaches who just aren't working out in the team then if the team wants them gone, they have to go out and actively convince the public of like what's going on behind closed doors. They have to like give up this privacy and convince them why they want them gone, why they want this change. And the teams just generally can't get anything they want without public oversight, which is just completely unfair because their well-being and personal life becomes in the hands of the public, and it becomes a media game because then people have to decide, do they believe the players or do they believe like these investors and coaches who are able to put on a facade in front of the media? And the third thing that we see happens is that investors just aren't going to be able to invest anymore because like the value of their investment decreases, which is why they're going to like lose resources and stuff like that, which is why the move should fall.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Janvi, for that excellent speech. I would now like to invite up the second speaker of the affirmative team to continue their team's case.
Okay, I'll just take POIs in the chat once you have them. Two things to do in this speech today. Firstly, I'm going to talk about why fans will make better decisions than the status quo. And secondly, I'll split on why we improve women's sport. So firstly, why will fans make good decisions? And note that Neg's entire responsive material and a lot of their actual substantive was simply based on the fact that fans don't know what's best for companies, that don't know what's best for teams. That's going to deal with all of this. Firstly, we want to talk about their right to. We tell you that season ticket holders have a unique right to make decisions for these sports teams because of the passion and because of the emotion they invested. Two reasons. Firstly, we tell you that sports is entertainment. We tell you that like entertainment is specifically catered towards fans. We want fans to actively be enjoying it. We think that clubs have a direct incentive for them to be like engaging with it, to be spending money on it, to be making sure that they're happy and engaging with the club. Secondly, we tell you that you don't get that level of like, they have a lot of emotional buy-in. They are really, really passionate about it. They feel good when their team wins. They feel bad when their team loses. You don't get that same buy-in with H&M. This isn't comparable to other businesses like clothing stores because sports has that unique level of passion involved with it. This means that they invest a lot emotionally. They have a right to do this. Secondly, we tell you that sports is intensely public. So we don't actually buy any of Neg's material around like how they don't know what's best for sport. They don't know any internal decisions. Why? Three reasons. Firstly, what can they say? They can say, A, whether managers or coaches are winning. We tell you that sports is inherently public in that regard. Like people are watching it, they see whether they're winning or not. We tell you that like if they're doing really, really badly, it's pretty easy for, or like they're looking to hire managers who historically do very badly. It's very easy for teams to say, hey, look, they're not great coaches, they're not great managers. We won't let them be hired. B, we tell you that like they can see if the managers don't have the best interests of clubs at heart. We tell you that like when Roman Abramovich, a Russian oligarch, comes in and buys Chelsea, we tell you that's quite obvious, that's public information. We tell you that it's not exactly a huge leap for these fans to say, hey, look, maybe he doesn't have the interest of the club at heart. Maybe this is just another transaction, another like asset for him to have. We tell you it's the same with Newcastle United and the Saudis. We tell you it's the same in American football teams and NBA teams, where you can see this pretty easily. But thirdly, we tell you that you can actually see when players aren't necessarily happy with their coaching and with their sports teams. We tell you that they have huge social media presences. These people are like practically celebrities. We tell you that if they're dissatisfied, sometimes they make that public. They don't have any power personally as a player to make any change. On our side of the house, fans will respond to that and they're able to get these managers fired, they're able to get transactions stopped. We tell you that's very important. We don't think that NEG is engaged with any of this material at all. But secondly, then, owners and managers can't do the same. They don't have the best interest at heart. Why is this? Firstly, they're incentivized to get rich people, to get rich oligarchs who don't come locally to buy out. Because as NEG has flagged, yes, sports are a business. They do want money, they do want profit. They want the money to be able to get, to be run, especially when they're financially struggling. So they're going to look to these people who are willing to buy out a club, and they're going to accept that on their side. We tell you that doesn't happen on ours. But secondly, they're incentivized to put players at risk to win. For example, cheating in cricket. We told you this at Bex. We gave you material on why like owners and stuff don't actually have a stake in that because the players who are the ones who are cheating who are going to get like officially reprimanded for it whilst they're going to roam free. We tell you that under our side of the house, fans can actually engage with that and say, hang on, no, that's not okay. That's not real sportsmanship. And we'll take them out entirely. I'm going to move on to my split. Before I do so, I'll take a POI.
Why is it then that fans will not pull out of supporting their favorite teams when it's bought like a rich Russian oligarch, like the one you just mentioned?
Okay, look, because here's the thing. People see their clubs as more than their owners, right? They're invested in the players. This is the team that they've been growing up with, since they were children. They have like a lot of emotional capital in investing that. We tell you they're going to continue to support them, even if they disagree with their owners. However, they're probably not going to engage with merch. They're probably not like going to go to the games. They're probably not going to actually feel good about it. And even if they do and they continue to get this, we tell you that the clubs themselves aren't actually going to be acting in favor of their fans. They're not going to be engaging as locally. Even if that isn't true as well, it's probably bad that these owners are getting these assets in the first place. Moving on then to my split on why we improve women's sport. Firstly, who are the season ticket holders in women's sporting games? Firstly, women. Secondly, a minority of men who tend to be quite progressive. Why is this? 4 reasons. Firstly, we tell you the blokish culture which exists around sports, such as rugby, such as football, such as gridiron, has a tendency to be quite off-putting towards women, if not like explicitly sexist. We tell you there are a lot of women, obviously, who enjoy sport, but if they want a space to enjoy it, We tell you that women's sport is by far the best way and most comfortable way for them to actually engage with that. Secondly, we tell you that women want to be seeing their own gender reflected in sports, in like public sports and successful professional sports. We think that's fairly intuitive. Thirdly, we tell you the historic, like derogatory view of many sports fans that women's sport is worse or like inherently ridiculous turns away a lot of traditional sports fans. We don't think you're going to get like sexists won't attend or engage with us. Why then does this matter? It means that season ticket holders have the best interests both of the team's success and of women's sporting success generally. We tell you this is especially likely with season ticket holders because they're not going to be casual fans. They're investing a lot of money into this. They're going to be have those interests at heart. What then does this do? It does three things. Firstly, we tell you that on our side, we get more women managers, coaches, etc. when fans have this ability to have veto power. Because currently the infrastructure of sport in women's teams is male. Why is this? Because women's professionalism in sport is so recent, skilled coaches and managers tend to be male. This isn't improving over time because even now that like ex-female pros exist and want to go into sporting, want to go into managerial positions, the only people with coaching and managerial experience are men. So clubs are naturally going to want to hire them even more. We tell you that ticket holders want to see representation in these areas because they can veto men when there are female options who are just as skilled. Clubs must listen to that. That's how we get more rep in that regard. Secondly, we tell you that we get better pay for women because we tell you that like fans won't accept the hiring of managers who have proven to provide abysmal play to their women's players because they recognize the need for that to exist. This is important because we get women properly rewarded for what they do, which will then improve the games. They can devote far more money and far more time to training. That's going to improve their skill, improve their thing over time. Thirdly, we tell you they're not going to be constantly downgraded with equipment and stands because we tell you the prioritization of men's sport has meant that women often have to take the worst stands, the worst stadiums, the worst places to play. We tell you that the fans aren't going to accept moves to cheaper grounds, aren't going to accept moves to stadiums, which are very clearly worse, which are very clearly not as good as the stadiums in men. We tell you that we then get facilities, which women's sports deserves, where they aren't treated as second-class citizens within sport. NEG cannot achieve these benefits as effectively on their side because there are no direct accountability mechs on their side of the house to enact direct change. Internal action is made within male-dominated sporting organizations. It won't be as authentic, it won't be as genuine, they won't have those interests at heart. Fans do. I'm so proud to propose this motion.
Awesome. Thank you, Jack, for that really great speech. I'd now like to invite up the second speaker of the negating team, Gabe, to continue their team's case.
With points of information, just wave and just be like, or if you have a POI sign, you can hold up a POI sign. That'd be great. We tell you that Affirmative loses this debate essentially when they spend more time on their split point than actually engaging with our actual material that has happened in this debate, right? And just to completely shut down everything that they said in their split point, which they spent more time on in the actual engagement, we tell you that if fans are deciding on who should actually run businesses, who manage businesses based on the gender of whoever is running it, when it's not and not actually based on skill, we tell you that it's actually going to be worse for the women teams. We tell you that they're not actually going to perform as well, especially because now you're just choosing something that's superficial over than actual skill and the ability of actual managers and actual owners in this debate, right? Three things I'm going to do for you in this debate. Firstly, I'm going to talk to you about the first contention, which is which side has better incentives to protect the team. Second, which side has better impacts and considerations for making major decisions. And thirdly, I'll be introducing the split point on the loss of confidentiality that sports teams have, which will be integrated within the second contention in this debate, right? Let's move on to the first point of question in this debate. which is which side has better incentives for sports owners to protect their teams, right? We told you immediately at first negating that what sports owners look like. We tell you that they are incentivized to keep as much profit as they want because that's the purpose of the business, right? And they keep these profits by making sure that these fans are appeased, right? They pay to watch the teams that they love, and teams really love good teams, which is framed at first negating. And if you perform well, you're gonna garner a lot more fans because of the fact that you're actually performing well. A lot of people like watching good games, not horrible games, right? So then how do teams actually perform well? We told you this, that through through three mechanisms, right? We told you that through proper management and through proper coaching, players will be able to perform exceedingly well and be able to actually perform to the best of their abilities. Secondly, we told you that a good owner would be able to have a lot of control, and that if they make a bad decision, they garner less support from their fans, and that in turn they would get less money, right? So obviously, good owners need to be existent in those sports teams in order for fans to support them, right? So their Russian oligarch point doesn't necessarily stand when that Russian oligarch is probably a really good owner and actually makes sure that Chelsea is performing exceedingly well and making really good decisions, right? And thirdly, we tell you that we get better when better environments are created. When we tell you that home games are always better. We tell you that when teams move from home to away games, we tell you that less people are actually going to go to those games, less profit goes to the sports teams, right? So we tell you that there are already a good amount of incentives for sports owners to actually make sure that their team is performing exceedingly well. So then why is it that these profits and these incentives are much more significantly better than what the affirming team has presented in this debate, right? We tell you a couple reasons. Firstly, we tell you that the way that they get profit is by making sure that the audiences and the fans feel like they're one of the team. Couple of responses to this. Firstly, there are people who don't know all the information that is being made in this debate. We tell you that when your significant impacts and significant decisions, major decisions such as changes of management, firing of management, and changes of owner, we tell you that there are a lot of internal dynamics. We tell you that there are a lot of inner reasonings as to why this occurs, and fans simply just don't have access to that information, right? We got a couple of responses from side affirming, telling us that fans will be able to see through the amount of times that these teams win, right? We tell you that winning isn't exactly knowing what the internal dynamics look like. We tell you that that's not what that isn't what the team looks like in their inner workings. We tell you that just seeing a team win or lose isn't enough to give you enough information to be able to make impactful decisions on major decisions, right? And we tell you, secondly, then the investors become essentially useless, and you actually get less profit on their side of the house, right? Firstly, we tell you that investors are buying in to be able to make decisions in order to make their fans, in order to make their team really good, right? And they get some money back. They're throwing a stake in the fire, right? But when we tell you that you're able to make make impactful decisions, if you're making impactful decisions in this debate just by buying seasonal tickets, a lot less investors actually exist on their side of the house. Therefore, there are actually going to be less profits for that sports teams, and thus they aren't able to buy as many resources as humanly possible in order to contribute to their team, right? And we tell you that through these couple of lines of reasoning, that their case about their sports teams performing exceedingly well on their side of the house just doesn't stand in this debate, right? So we've won that contention in this debate. Before I move on to my second contention, though, I'd like to take a POI from any members of the affirming team.
When a local club gets bought off by a wealthy businessman, how do you ensure that the emotionally invested season ticket holders will still follow that club?
If they perform exceedingly well, then they're going to stay invested, right? Because they want to see their team perform exceedingly well. If they're not performing well and you're investing in something, you're obviously going to dip out of that, right? That was just completely rubbish, right? Moving on to the second contention, the negative, which side has better impacts when making considerations for major decisions, right? We tell you that their world looks like this. They're going to make an announcement and they're going to leave it to a vote. And if the majority votes to veto a decision, then that veto will not that decision will not happen, right? Then they told us that they would be able to get fans to engage, and they then told us that they get better decisions on their side of the house made because of the engagement that comes from fans, right? We tell you for two reasons why this doesn't stand. Firstly, there are actually negative impacts when announcements and is being left to a vote to the fans, right? And this is where my split point comes in this debate. We tell you that there's a huge loss of confidentiality that sports teams have, right? What does the world look like right now, right? We tell you that teams have a lot of confidentiality, that a lot of internal workings and hidden and internal dynamics are protected, and they have that right to privacy, right? Because no team wants to be able to show that they're vulnerable to other teams because of the fact that this is not something that's marketable, right? You don't want to support a team that's obviously struggling. Therefore, a lot of teams have to cover up that facade, and that remains confidential. But then what does it look like on the affirmative side of the house then? In order to make a decision, a decision needs to be announced to the public, right? But even so, if we take them at their best, and if it's only announced to the seasonal ticket holders, we tell you that there are a couple of reasons as to why this is really, really bad. Firstly, you lose a lot of confidential when you put a lot of teams at risk, right? We tell you that anyone can purchase these seasonal tickets, and that by being able to purchase these seasonal tickets, you're able to get a lot of information about major decisions that's being made on their side of the house, and a lot of influential people are able to make these, are able to see these informations. We see that a lot of rival teams will be able to see these impactful decisions being made and see how vulnerable the other teams are, which is just inherently detrimental to the sportsmanship of sports and as such, and the authenticity of sports. But secondly, we then tell you that people will then actively, rival fans from other teams will then actively seek out to veto good decisions being made by the sports team in order to make sure that the other teams that they dislike are probably going to be worsened off on their side of the house. So that's why there are a lot of negative impacts as to why their model doesn't work in this debate. But then why is it then they're engaged, why is it then that their engagement that they provide in this debate is really bad? Firstly, we tell you that the audience sees it and the fan sees it through a superficial lens, and they won't be able to make really informed decisions, right? They don't know the internal dynamics, they don't know the inner workings. We tell you that they're not going to be able to garner enough information in this debate to be able to make impactful decisions that are good for the sports team. And we tell you that these decisions not being made properly is inherently detrimental to what the sports teams are. And for the following reasons, you should side with side negate.
Awesome, thank you, Gabe, for that excellent speech. I would now like to invite up the third speaker of the affirmative team, Riley, to conclude the substantive portion of their case.
So I would love just POIs in the chat, please. Thank you. Awesome. What the Negate team has struggled to find in this debate is where we actually stand and how much we value the fans. First and foremost, they gave us a one-line analysis on Jack's whole split. They told us that fan engagement won't be based on owners, and even if it is, this is bad engagement. We tell you that when a women's team is coached by a woman who knows how hard it is to be a woman in the sporting industry, we can see how this will uplift the team and stop them from getting exploited within a man-dominated sector. Two main points of place in today's debate: how these ticket holders make the best decisions and how this impacts engagement better on our side. Secondly, profit-wise, and how the monetary gain upholds on our side. First and foremost, how do we see when managers are bad as fans and as seasonal ticket holders? One, the media is incentivized to report bad behavior for views, for clickbait, for anything. They want to show it because it's something to report on. because it's something to report on. They're going to want to report on this for a couple of reasons. One, because it's sport and everyone loves sport and everyone wants to know about it. Two, because these fans are incentivized to research more about their teams. One, because of the loyalty. Two, because of how long they've been invested in such of these teams. As we can see with the high monetary investment that these seasonal tickets hold and put back into these favourable teams. Secondly, under why we see when managers are bad, these seasonal ticket holders, we've told you quite a bit how they are actually essentially qualified to look at this from an outsider's perspective and get most of what we want to show them. They can see when a team is performing well and they can see when a team is performing bad. I'll get to more of their analysis and how it falls away under this side of the house. First of all, on the media facade, they said that we only see the superficial sides of it. In the social media age, we can see how many of these team members are talking about their careers, talking about things that they've gone through. And on their side of the house, they talked about how they didn't want to be seen vulnerable under this. We completely reject this mischaracterization. We think it's quite stereotypical that many of the people in these sports won't want to seem vulnerable. If it's a trade-off that they have to make to ensure that they get a better manager or a better coach or better working conditions, we think that they will make that at the cost of vulnerability, when that will cost them a lot within their sports. They told us a lot how they would have to actively convince the public. We don't see anything wrong with having to actively convince the public when it will get them so many gain. They told us that it's not public. We told you at Jack for a couple of reasons that it is very public, and this information is quite easily found. One, through just simple research, a quick Google search will tell you mostly what you need to know. Two, through history, wins and losers, and history of the coach themselves. Three, of the wins and losers and how that is affected by who they'll manage. And four, team member investment through social media, like I've already touched on before. This was lightly skimmed over by the negating team. They didn't really see the point in this and how important this is. We told you how these ticket holders are very important within this debate because one, they have a right to know about it. They have an emotional investment. They also have a monetary investment in which they compared it to H&M. We told you at Jack that this is far more than buying clothes at H&M. This is following a sports team from day dot, whether they are from your local vicinity or not. You have a large investment into this team in involvement, loyalty, and money-wise. Therefore, these team members are qualified to make these veto decisions to ensure that their team members can keep playing the sports that they want in a safe environment. We can see how they are qualified, as these season tickets aren't specific enough. It's not enough for them to say that they can just swap over to another team. We think when you're spending hundreds of pounds for these season tickets, you're not just going to throw that all away over one win. We saw this with the Warriors when they were consistently losing, and yet they still had such a large fan base. We've seen this historically, and we will continue to see this. We have won this point on a couple points. One, because we've shown how these fans are actively involved, whether that's social media-wise, whether that's just shouting in the stands, and whether that's buying merch. This is so important because we value the fans. They put so much into the teams, and therefore we want to give back to them. Now, quickly, I will take a POI if you have one.
Do you think that the public has the same access to resources about the internal affairs of the team as the inner experts who know the workings of the team?
I actually agree with this to a certain extent. I've already given you a lot of mechanisms to do with this. I told you how media wants to showcase this. I've told you how teammates will want to showcase this if they want change. If they want something to change, they will showcase it, and therefore they will have the same amount of information. Second point of clash on the monetary gain that upholds on our side of the house. First of all, we want to talk about this Russian oligarch. We gave you many mechanisms as to how this is upheld in some of these team members when they kind of bought just for prestige. Look, I bought a football team. We've told you that the emotional capital and the investment into the team will ensure that they want these teams to be managed and coached by local people that they know will be putting their all into the team, just as they do through their support. We told you that when this happens, engagement falters. Engagement may still be there, but it will falter. Clubs will falter, merch and locality will all fall away if this is not able to be vetoed out like we have said. They said really good oligarch. They get oligarchs not for good management, it's for money, right? We want a manager, we want people owning these places who will be able to give back to the fans and ensure that their teams keep doing well. Again, these oligarchs can be very controversial. We don't want that connotation with our favorite sports teams. This will falter engagement within the sporting sector of our economy, and the public backlash will be immediate and will be intense. Therefore, when they tell us that this winning dynamic, and when we don't see much beyond this, we can see by the amount of money that actually gets pushed into this, whether they win or lose, apparently isn't enough to actually see into the inner workings. We can see by the amount of money going in, the amount of money that being spent on fans can be intrinsically linked to fan involvement and how much support this garners the team. Therefore, teams don't, even at our worst, in which some of our investors fall out, they don't get all of this money from these investors. Even if we lose some, we still get team revenue from ad revenue, tickets and merch, etc. Now, this is so important because that means even at our worst, we are still better than the opposing team today. Therefore, we believe on our side of the house that our investors are as important as many stakeholders. They are personally invested in their team, both emotionally and through the amount of money that they pay for these tickets. By convincing the public of what they need to change, these sports members will be able to have a deep and personal relationship with their fans. We want to go back to our roots with these sports members, and this is so important because we want to ensure that the fans get out exactly what we put in. Therefore, we have won this debate by miles. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Riley, for that brilliant speech. I would now like to invite up Adi to conclude the substantive portion of their team's case and the debate as a whole.
Cool, can you guys hear me? Perfect. Wait for POIs.
POIs.
Oh, yeah, for POIs, if you guys can just use your sign, that'd be great. So if we can prove to you in this debate that allowing season ticket holders to make major decisions is detrimental to sports teams and the sports industry, then we have won this debate today. So first of all, there's two main points of clash that I identified in this debate. The first one is who can make the better decisions for the team. Is it the fans or the owners, the status quo, the shareholders and the experts, right? So the first thing I think we all agree on is that both shareholders, investors, owners, and fans, they all want the same outcome for the team. They want them to perform at their best. They want them to win games. They want them to obviously do their best all around. And a lot of things are built into that, right? Obviously, if we want the team to perform at their best, we want them to win games. They have to take care of their well-being. They have to make sure that the team is happy. That we have to make sure that they're operating properly. We have to make sure that they're getting the best possible coaching available to them, and that all their resources are being utilized effectively. So just right from the onset, we agree on all the major outcomes that we want for the team. So now there's two ways that we really have to get there. On our side of the house, we have people that are invested in the team, such as the owners and the shareholders, delegating their responsibility to seasoned experts who are using data-driven algorithms and technical mathematical formulas to make decisions based for the good of the team with all of the inside information. On their side of the house, you have fans using superficial information to make these decisions. Now, they tried to tell you that this information is not superficial for two key reasons, right? The first thing they said is that due to social media, this facade can be broken and essentially everyone can have access to all of the information. And the second thing they told us is that, well, if they really want to know, they can just go and do research, right? They didn't clarify how you do research. They said just well, they can go and research and they can find out all about the team. But if you really think about it, this team is training 12 months of the year, several times a week. Dozens of hours are spent behind the scenes in coaching and training, working with coaches, working with sports leadership. There's very complex dynamics that nobody has access to because teams protect this information. information, that's confidential, private information that they cannot afford to have leaked to their competitors, that they cannot afford to have out there in public, because it's essential to the success of the team that this information remains private for them. It's part of their strategy, right? So teams will never showcase their problems because it makes them look weak. If teams are struggling internally, if they have a coach that they're having problems with, their job is to present a united front to their fans. Their job is to present a united front to the rest of the world, to their competitors. They want to look strong. They want to look like they have this competition in the bag, right? They want to assure people that they should keep on coming to their games. They want fans to keep their hopes up. They don't want to go out there and say, oh, look, guys, we're really struggling with this coach. They're going to come out there, they're going to go to the press conference, and they're going to present by necessity a united front, right? Like they're all in perfect harmony, that they're doing really well, that they're doing exactly as they wanted. We've all seen this countless times, right? They don't air their dirty laundry in public, because that would be highly detrimental to the team. So when making these decisions, the people on the inside, the shareholders, the experts, like we already clarified, have the same sort of incentive structure. However, the information that they're using to make these decisions is a lot more concrete. For example, a coach might not be conducive to the well-being, to the success of the team, right? The coach's style might not work for the team, but because they've gone out and they've presented such a united front, they've publicly announced their support for the coach, the fans think, oh, well, this coach is probably good for the team. You know, the team is winning. It might not be the best outcome for the team. The team might be really down, but the fans cannot see that. All the fans can see is that, well, they said that the coach looks pretty presentable in front of at the press conference. We really like the personality of the coach, but they can't have any idea of what that actually looks like behind the scenes. So when making these important decisions, it's essential to know all of this key information that's protected either because of private or confidentiality reasons, or because that information cannot be publicly available to preserve the unity and coherence of the team, right? So for that reason, we see that one side clearly makes better decisions. We all want the same outcomes. It's just which is the best route to get there. And the benefits on our side far, far outweigh the fans making decisions based on the necessarily superficial information. That's not even a question. And so we have won this point of clash by miles, right? And so that brings me to the second point of clash in this debate. Are ticket holders entitled to make decisions for this team? But before I go there, I'll take a POI if they have one.
Sorry. If players want to protect the image of strength to fans, why do players like Simone Biles come out publicly with mental health struggles?
Right. So first of all, Simone Biles is not a sports team. That's just one person talking about their own personal struggles, right? There's somebody talking about their own mental health, that sort of thing, right? And she doesn't have that sort of image is not necessary, that is not integral to her sport. There's a lot of other sports where you are playing teams against teams. There's a lot more complex dynamics involved, right? So even though you can point to some instance that says, look, that player talked about a problem that they had in their life, that doesn't mean that we know all of Simone Biles' problems, right? We don't know a lot of the internal dynamics. We don't know a lot of what went on in her life. We don't know a lot about the conflicts that potentially took place in her team. All we see is what Simone Biles chooses to publicize. All we see is what she chooses to say, the 2 lines at the press conference. That's all fans have access to. Okay, so that brings me to the second point of clash. Are ticket holders entitled to make decisions for the team? And so the main point that we heard throughout the debate from F is that season ticket holders are emotionally invested, and that's what gives them the right to make decisions, right? If I'm super emotional, if I'm super passionate about something, I get to make decisions for the team, right? But we see all throughout the business world, this is not how it works in any industry. I can be super passionate about Starbucks coffee, right? I drink my coffee at Starbucks every morning. I go there several times a day. I'm really emotionally invested. My life might depend on Starbucks coffee, right? But that doesn't mean that as a customer, I have the right to say who Starbucks hires, who Starbucks fires, who's in the leadership, what kind of coffee they purchase. That's not my purview, right? Teams are accountable to their shareholders like any other businesses and their customers in different ways. That's not to say that teams aren't accountable to their customers, to their fans in any way. Fans exercise control through their spending decisions, through their decisions, right? If you are really passionate about a team, if your team is performing really well, they won the cup this season, right? For example, if your local team goes out there and they win the championship this season, odds are they're going to get a whole lot of new fans. People that perhaps weren't even interested in the sport before are going to come. They're going to purchase season tickets. They're going to purchase merch. They're going to get involved, right? So there's huge financial upsides here to performing well, and so the fans do exercise control in that manner. Right, fans, if teams make decisions that fans don't agree with, that fans find outrageous, they're obviously not going to want to continue to support the team in the same way, or they're going to exercise their control with their spending decisions. And so this brings me to the second point here, which is that the issues surrounding sale decisions, which is one of the points in this debate. So do they have the right to make decisions regarding the sale of the team, and how does this affect investment? So we argue here that by allowing fans to make decisions, you will decrease the amount of investment that the team receives, because shareholders can be held hostage, essentially, right? In effect, you can say that until all the fans agree, or until a majority of the season ticket holders agree, that the people that invested in the team can't sell off their shares. They can't sell what they want. These investors invested their own capital. They put their own capital at risk in the team, and that's what makes them entitled to make decisions for the team. They put their capital at risk. They purchase an ownership share in the company. That's their property, right? Just like their house or their car, that is their property, and they have the right under all established property law precedent. They have the right to sell that to whoever they want. That's their property, and nobody else has the right to tell them. Just because I'm emotionally invested in the property that you own, I get to tell you how you get to control your assets, the things that you put in your capital at risk to provide. And so that's why we believe that we have won this debate by such a large margin. And so that's why this makes shuffle.
Yeah, but it's not.
Yeah, I'm all good.
All good.
Yay. Touch wood.
Negating has immediately won this debate when affirming comes out here and tells us that informed decisions are probably definitely going to be made by season ticket holders, because they see everything that's happening. They see the wins in the games. They know what's happening through social media. They're able to do their own research, and they're able to read from the media that they're able to know everything about what's happening in sports teams. We tell you that this is the most illogical, rubbish point that we've ever heard in this debate, right? One major point of clash in this debate, and a debate-winning point of clash, and in this debate, and when we win this debate, we essentially shut off affirming's path to victory, and there's absolutely no way for them to crawl back in this debate, right? We told you immediately through first neg, through second neg, and third neg that shareholders and investors and owners have all the insider knowledge, right? They know everything that's happening in that sports teams. They know exactly what's going on, right? And then we were told at affirming that there were three essential responses that fans would be able to know what's happening as well, through research, through media, and through social media, right? We tell you through two responses why this doesn't work. First of all, teams put out information that they want to have been able to see, right? We tell you that social media accounts only show the successes, don't actually show the struggles, and this is an actual fact. That's something that cannot be contested. And even if sports players show a little bit of vulnerability, we tell you that it is completely separate from sports teams and don't actually contribute anything to what the sports teams do, right? So then for that reason, and because they are putting out the information that they only want to be seen, research doesn't work because the research that they're being fed is not actually what is happening. And secondly, we tell you that social media, being able to read up on social media doesn't work because they're also being fed on what the teams actually want these fans to be seen in this debate, right? The second line of response is directly towards the media control, right? We tell you that media controls what they show, right? And there are a couple of reasons why that this is inherently bad for side affirming. We tell you that this is the media could be actively sabotaging these specific sports teams because of personal biases, and so journalists such as who hate the sports teams, who might hate the LA Clippers or who might hate Chelsea, might write out a statement piece about something that's completely not true when they don't have insider knowledge, right? right? Because they aren't the investors, they aren't the shareholders, and they're certainly not the owners of that specific sports team, unless they're a Russian oligarch and they're writing about their own team, which completely doesn't make sense. Secondly, we tell you that a lot of media is clickbaity and they're only there to make sure that they get clicks in order to profit off of them, which essentially means that a lot of the information that is being showcased and a lot of information that people are gathering is completely not true and always not necessarily something that is as a matter of fact, right? We tell you that a lot of the information that people will be receiving in this, that fans will be receiving in this debate is not necessarily true and is completely a false narrative that has been presented by the media and not actually what the team looks like, right? And we tell you already that Affirmative doesn't believe their own material and that that fans would be able to know what insider knowledges are when they literally say that fans have an outsider perspective, not an insider perspective. They tell us it's an outsider perspective, which means they don't actually know what's on the inside, right? I can look at a house and know it's a house, but I don't actually know where the lounge is, where the sofa is, where the bed is, right? This is the exact same thing with sports teams. I don't know how the internal dynamics work. I don't know how the inner workings work. And I certainly don't know the relationships between the coaches and the players, right? And thus, for these following reasons, AF completely loses the debate. There's no way for them to crawl back. That's why we just actively win and proud to negating Restus' case.
Okay.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Gabe, for that legendary reply. You're muted now. That's great. Awesome. And I would now like to invite up the affirmative leader to conclude today's debate.
Okay, two major contentions in this debate. Firstly, how are ticket holders best placed to make decisions for their clubs? Secondly, how do we get better engagement? On the first one, how are ticket holders best placed to make decisions? Neg told us that they aren't. Why? One, because they don't have knowledge of internal workings. No, they hinge so much of their responsive material around this one point. They must have spent 6 minutes on it, but we never actually saw an explanation as to A, why it was important, and B, what that looked like. Secondly, they also kind of told us that there was no personal stake in this. What were our responses to this? We gave 4 on why they are actually important. Firstly, we told you that emotional investment means they're going to put the interests of the club as a whole at heart, not just profit, which is what the sports administrations are there to do. Secondly, we told you that because they care about locality, about clubs being genuine to their fans and to people that support them, they won't accept corrupt owners using the sports as another prestigious asset grab or moving stadiums away from their localities for money. We tell you that fans respond a lot to authenticity and people caring about as people. Thirdly, we told you they won't let managers and owners get away with exploiting their players because of the general expectation of sportsmanship and care for individual players. We don't think that any of that analysis around, hey, it's not going to become public is really enough, because even in the instances they do, they haven't proved why they do anything about that either. Any of their harms are largely symmetric. Fourthly, on women's sport. This is where it gets crucial, because if their second speaker is going to stand up here and say he spent 4 minutes on his split in his second speech, he then can't get away with only having one line of analysis on this. We tell you that women's sports are a key stakeholder in this, and they never prove why they get better outcomes for them, why they get anything for them on their side, and never prove why we don't. We tell you that point still stands in this debate completely. This whole point is important because we prove that the direct response is more important and more effective when it isn't left up to clubs, and that that ticket holders are best placed to do this. Crucially, Neg never told us why they are more likely to get change when bad stuff happens on their side. That was a real large hole in their case that we never saw any response to. Okay. Secondly, then, on how do we get better engagement? We told you that fans respond better to clubs when they like the managers, when they're doing well, when they feel as if owners are responding to what they want, when they feel as if they care about their fans. We tell you that doesn't happen when they don't have a direct stake in the matter. People will engage more with the clubs. We told you they'd get more revenue through tickets, through merchandise. We tell you this is especially important in women's sport, which doesn't have the infrastructure, which doesn't have the support. I told you we'd get more of that on their side. But even if they don't, even if, as Meg told us, the investors will feel less valued, even if that material on the fact that on why we do get more revenue doesn't stand. Riley gave you material about how other forms of revenue exist. And even if those things don't stand, even if ad revenue and stuff isn't enough, we tell you that it will take a small hit in money easily in favor of authenticity and control. We tell you this shouldn't value this point as much as Neg has told you you should in this debate. It also doesn't engage with any of the material around why the club hire us are actually going to be far more engaged themselves and how that trickles down into how these sporting clubs actually present themselves as well. This is important because it means that most of the harms around engagement don't actually exist. So what do we have at the end of this debate? We tell you that ticket holders are best placed to make the decisions. They will make best decisions for their fans. We tell you that the status quo isn't enough. The status quo won't get the outcomes that are necessary. They won't get change. They won't get anything. That is why I'm so proud to affirm.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Excuse me. Awesome. Thank you so much for that excellent